Hey guys, Catalyst here, welcome back to the channel. Last week I made a video about the changes coming to the realistic modern first-person shooter, World War III, which is attempting a comeback with brand new mechanics and a new and improved vision for the game. That video talked about all those changes and included some behind-the-scenes information from a developer Q&A that I suggest you watch before watching this video, since a lot of what I talked about in that video last week I will be referencing in the video today. World War III recently had its Veterans Alpha test, which I was invited to, which gave players their first chance to play the reimagined version of the game for the first time. I played throughout the weekend, and I think I've played enough to get a good idea on where I stand on World War III, keeping in mind, of course, that the game is still in alpha state and will be more polished at launch. So I'm just going to sit here, have a cup of coffee, talk to you about my feelings on the game, which I guess a cup of coffee probably isn't the best thing for the amount of talking that I'm going to do, but we're going to try and get this done in one take so I can get this out to you. So, World War III is back, but is it better than ever? Here's what I think. Well, first and foremost, this alpha was meant to be a technical test to see how World War III servers would hold up with traffic, and also test the game's optimization, which in truth was a huge issue with the game's original launch into early access in 2018, and I'm happy to say that for the most part the optimization was very much so improved and stable throughout most of my playthrough. Servers went down a few times here or there. Luckily I wasn't affected by that, but for those who were affected by it, the servers were usually fixed within a few hours or so. I did have a little bit of menu lag and some stuttering here or there, but I held at minimum 120 frames per second and a maximum of 160 frames per second in-game with the 2070 Super graphics card, so there wasn't really any poor optimization there. The game ran smoothly. There were a few interesting graphical glitches here and there, but for the most part my experience with the game played well and looked fine graphically, with some room for polish in the coming months. As for the actual game though, what do I think? Well, I think this game has a lot of potential. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, I can see what they're working towards, but as of right now, with this build, it is really weighed down by some of the design choices, and I left the alpha feeling underwhelmed, if anything. For me, the most fun that I had was when I was fighting with my squad in a big firefight on a contested objective, as it led to some fun kill streaks and genuinely tense encounters where every life mattered. It was fun in the same way that Rainbow Six Siege is fun when you look past and ignore all the gadgets. You clear the capture zone in a cat and mouse game, and the excitement of clearing a contested objective room to room using true to life weapons without knowing whether there was an enemy on the other side of the hallway or not was something that I really haven't quite experienced on a scale this big, and it was genuinely exciting, and that's great, and that's where this game can become a unique experience and find its place in my mind. Unfortunately, the game just doesn't deliver enough of those moments to keep me satisfied for my personal taste, and that's due to the game's glaring pacing issues, which for me is the biggest detriment currently to World War III. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh, surprise, surprise. The arcade shooter competitive player doesn't like that he's forced to play slow, and no, that's not it at all, actually. It's not pacing in the context that you might think. This isn't an issue of being able to, or unable rather, to slide in and wipe out an entire room like a crack addict with a anime skin on my weapon, because that's not the case. I actually didn't mind taking my pacing slow at all. I'm talking about pacing in the terms of the length of actually finding gunfights, and it's mostly due to how capturing zones work in World War III. It currently takes way too long to capture objectives. In World War III, there were times where there were 6 or 7 people on the capture zone, and it still felt like an eternity to capture, so I'm not entirely sure if the capturing itself is too long in general, or the increase in capture speed, depending how many players or teammates are on the flag with you, is not scaled high enough. I'm not quite sure which one it is. But you can see here in this clip how many people are just standing around waiting for the sector to finish being captured, and then keep in mind that this is a 20v20 game mode, so with 7 or 8 people on the zone, this is a good 30 to 40% of the team that is stuck here capping the flag instead of rotating around the map, and this created a lot of moments for me when I just stood around and subconsciously thought to myself, gee, where is everybody? And then I checked the scoreboard thinking that the enemy team was down playing, players, but found that they still had a full team, and my only conclusion was that they were stuck capturing flags as well. So it just led to a very inconsistent pacing where there were large chunks of boredom, and then sporadic surprises in action in which I more than often than not died because I was playing this game much faster than intended and got caught out sprinting from flag to flag because I couldn't find anybody. Maybe that's all by design and that's how they want the game to play, but there is slow gameplay and then there's just interesting gameplay, and I think more often than not it tilted more towards the latter rather than the former. I think this issue would be helped by increasing the capture speed, like I already mentioned, but also allowing spawns on a contested flag. Now, I want to preface this by saying I know I am primarily a Battlefield player, and I went into this alpha with the mindset, do not try and make this like Battlefield. But this is something that I think the game sorely needs in some capacity. The way it is now, as soon as the enemy team has majority on the point, you cannot spawn around it. You either have to hope a squad mate is near the flag being captured, or you spawn on the closest flag to it, and rush over until a firing squad of enemies that has already had time to set up mows you down, or you get shot from somebody else on your rotation over there. And like I said earlier, the game is at its best in my opinion when there is a big team fight on a flag and there is tense CQC room-to-room fighting. It's tense, it's unique, and I want as much of that gameplay as possible, so it makes sense to have some kind of spawning mechanic that allows circumstantial spawns on contested flags. Now, if you don't want to go make it progress-based like Battlefield, might I suggest the ability to spawn on a contested zone, only if both zones are linked together for your team. The game puts a lot of emphasis on having both objectives in a sector fully linked for increased point gain, but might I suggest further encouraging linking the sectors by giving players that ability to spawn on points that are already being taken, but only if the other point in the sector is under their control. I think once the flow of the map is fixed, the game might become a more steady experience instead of being so touch and go. You could also raise the player count. I know from the developer Q&A that they thought about player size a lot for the TAC Ops mode, and they still settled on 20v20, but I personally feel like that it may be good to go a little higher, even 25v25. Some maps need it more than others. I think Moscow specifically suffers from that player count sometimes, but then again, I just may be partial to having more things to shoot at, and I understand that. So I kind of go back and forth on raising the player count. And I will say that I think this game in particular suffers really badly from players leaving the game. I mean, of course, it sucks whenever a player backs out of the lobby in any video game, but this game in particular, I think it hits very hard for some of the reasons I outlined above. Some games in the genre are still very playable when the lobby loses some players, but in World War III, when a couple of people leave, you can really feel it, and the issues that I have with the game's pacing are amplified by 3. I know it seems like we've been talking about a bunch of things here, but believe it or not, that was all one point, kind of. I've got a lot of feedback. My second biggest issue with the game is, as it is now, it would definitely be directional audio. Oh my goodness. Footsteps are pretty much non-existent in this build. The same sometimes could be said of vehicles as well, which is a little odd because overall there isn't that much going on a lot of the time in World War III, which sounds like a complaint, but it's actually kind of refreshing, and I would say it as a compliment. You know, a lot of first-person shooters on the market right now can be so chaotic with all the extra audio that Footsteps can get swallowed by explosion audio, gunfire spam, announcer voices, but in World War III that's just not the case. The announcer audio is actually quite low, but not low enough to where you can't hear it. And it's really a good thing that the audio is like that, but when it comes to the footsteps that you 100% should hear, they just don't work. I cannot tell you how many times I died and thought to myself, wait, how did that guy get there? I should have heard him. Or times when an enemy and myself ran up on each other and neither of us heard each other's footsteps, and we both kind of stood there for a second awkwardly, trying to figure out what we were looking at, and then quick draw on one another like a Clint Eastwood Western film. And it's a problem with teammate footstep audio too. It's a very good thing that the friendly fire mechanic is so forgiving in this game because, oh my, I shot my fair share of teammates because they surprised me and I didn't hear their footsteps. And I've been mag dumped a couple of times by my teammates too, so I guess the feeling is mutual and the directional audio needs to be a priority fix for the beta. Those are my big points of feedback. Now to some of the smaller things that I could sort of talk about more quickly and loosely. Let's talk about gameplay. For me, it's a bit of a mixed bag. I will say that I quite like the time to kill. I think it's fast, as it needs to be for a game like this, but on the receiving end, it was very reasonable, and I enjoyed it. It lends itself very well to being a lethal time to kill, but not lethal enough to where it impedes map flow and rotation, and it becomes annoying because you just die so quickly. One thing I didn't like was how the recoil and the weapons felt and sounded. It was extremely unpredictable and floaty to me. Maybe I'm just bad and didn't really figure out how the recoil works. But I played for a few hours on both Friday and Sunday, and maybe I just needed more time to figure out how the gunplay works, but as of now, I just felt it was very floaty. I tried tap firing, I tried mag dumping, crouching, standing, single firing, and I couldn't pick up on the consistency in patterns or recoil mechanics, which may be by design, which if it is, I suppose it's just not for me. The sound of the weapons was improved from the last time I played, but I wish the guns had more bass to them. Right now, weapons sound kind of plastic. I will say though that long-range gunfights feel really bad and like a pissing contest sometimes, which of course, you aren't going to be terribly effective at long range with anything besides a marksman rifle or a sniper rifle, but I shouldn't feel discouraged from trying to hit those players, if you know what I mean. Eventually, I just started marking targets and moving on, hoping somebody was close enough on my team to get the kill. It's kind of like seeing your friend on the other side of a long highway, but all you could do is wave at him. Eventually, I just stopped shooting at longer range targets and either had to find a way to get closer to them to be CQC or just leave them alone. As far as gadgets are concerned, I think the only issue I had was with the prompts to interact the ammo packs and health packs. So in World War III, when you throw out a med pack on the ground, you have to be looking almost dead at it in order to interact with it, and you have to take your eyes off what you're doing, which some may argue that in that case it provides some risk and reward to leaving the firefight to heal or get ammo, which I agree with. I would just like the prompt to be a little bit more forgiving so it's not so tedious to have to stare directly at the med pack every time I want to heal. Vehicles. Okay, so this is a tough one, but the vehicle balance needs to be looked at a little more thoroughly, and that's coming from both sides. I've seen people say that it's way too easy to destroy tanks. Some people say that vehicles are very overpowered. My main issue with vehicles is that they have the potential to be very spammable, and that's a bit of a byproduct of the player count for World War III. In the game, if you die in a vehicle, it is very easy for you to just go back to spawn and get another one, and with there being only so many players on one team, your competition for getting a vehicle isn't that high. It's not like somebody is camping that vehicle spawn, and that's before considering the players that just don't want to be in vehicles and just want to play 100% infantry. So I think overall the balance of vehicles needs another pass in the boardroom. How much damage anti-vehicle weapons do, how much armor tanks have, how long before vehicles respawn, etc., so on and so on. The vehicles themselves handle well enough. I didn't have too many problems navigating in vehicles, and the UI inside the tanks was pretty clean, which, speaking of, the UI in the game itself is very much improved. I will say that. It was very enjoyable. Everything looked pretty clean, and it's mostly easy to navigate. The most confusing of the bunch is definitely the squad selection screen, so that needs a bit of some tuning. I think it is worth mentioning that I did play this alpha solo the entire time, but I do know people that had trouble squatting up with friends in particular because of the UI. They were eventually able to get it, but it was not a fun process for them. The new movement and animation system is really improved. There is still some clunkiness here and there, but I think overall the vaulting, climbing, proning, sliding, everything about the new movement system I really enjoyed. The animations for reloading and weapon switching look great. You can tell that they really took their time into improving that. I will say that looking at animations of another player could use some work, as in what I see when looking at teammates and enemies in-game as opposed to what my character's animations are. They could use some work, but it's an alpha. I expect that to be polished moving forward. Oh, so one of the game's big things is strikes, which they talked a lot about in the feedback survey that we all filled out for the test alpha. And strikes is kind of World War III's answer to Call of Duty's kill streak system. So in World War III, you earn these strikes passively over time while scoring points in a game. So it's not tied to kills or score in a given life, but rather across the entire game. And it will be familiar to a lot of players, things like UAVs, airstrike, helicopter call-ins, etc. There was nothing inherently wrong with any of this. Just for me personally, I kind of found strikes to be a bit of an afterthought. If I didn't have the UI on the right-hand corner of my screen telling me that I had enough points for a UAV or an airstrike, I probably wouldn't have known I even had these available. You can customize your packages however you want, as far as I know, which is nice. So if you were more into these than I was, the freedom to choose your strikes is a huge plus, which Speaking of, I think a good final talking point for today is about customization and progression. There is a definite grind for the game now, and there is a lot to unlock. Everything is very hyper-realistic and looks fantastic, and the customization options are nearly endless. I wish there were more options for character voices instead of every American sounding like they were from a small family farm in Arkansas, but, you know, maybe they'll add something moving forward. The point being, the customization options were very enticing and definitely showed that there was a lot to grind for in World War III if you really enjoyed the game. That pretty much covers everything, I think. If I missed something or you have any specific questions about the game or what my opinion on something was on something I didn't share, leave a comment down below. I think this game has the potential to be something very unique and popular, but it's those few design decisions in the gameplay loop that I think really weigh the game down a bit. And I think that's everything for today's video. It's going to be a longer one, so I'll just shut up. Thank you for watching. If you played the alpha, what did you think of it? Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more, and once again, thanks for watching. My name is Catalyst, and I will see you all another time.